Welcome to Hill Country Homilies, weekly homilies from St. Andrew Orthodox Church in Liberty Hill, Texas. St. Andrew's is an old calendar Orthodox church, sharing the faith of the apostles and the love of Christ with all who seek His truth. Now, let's listen to this week's homily.
Christ is risen. He is risen. Cristo ha resuscitado. Christos anesti. Have you ever met somebody who is just settled and confident in their faith? They know where they're going. They're confident that God is at their side. Everything they do, they're certain that it was willed by God and blessed by Him as well. Every step, every day, every breath, they feel they're drawing closer and closer to the kingdom. I've met a few people like that through the years, and I'll tell you that for me, it's always a little bit unsettling. It's unsettling because when I run into that, mostly, I don't think it reflects the reality that most of us live with that. And because of that, more often than not, I think what they see as sureness and confidence is more often naivete. I think that most of us, certainly me included, spend most of our lives wrestling with our faith, mixing moments of assuredness and blessedness and beauty and utter love and adoration with seeds of doubts and questioning and even anger. On some days, we're that settled, confident follower of Christ, and on others, the best that we can do is to force ourselves to just say our prayers silently and not shake our fist at God. And this, more than anything, I think, is the normal state of a Christian. We struggle daily to move forward in our faith, as Paul says, working out our own salvation with fear and with trembling. And today, we read from the Gospel of John the story of the healing of the paralytic at the pool of Bethesda. Now, this story for centuries was the subject of a lot of speculation as to whether it was a real story or just an allegory that John had placed into his gospel. And the reason that they were so puzzled by this was this description of the pool as having 5 porches. This seemed a bizarre and unusual trait which didn't make any sense with what was known of the baths at the time of Christ. Who would have built a pentagon-shaped pool with 5 porches around it? There certainly wasn't any sort of symbolic archaeology in either Judaism or the Roman paganism that would have suggested that there would be a pentagonal-shaped structure like is described in the gospel. And so there was this question, was this just some odd detail that John had added to his gospel in a story that was meant to be illustrative but was not meant to be historical? And this was not an uncommon thought until late in the 19th century, when in Jerusalem they excavated a pool with 5 porches. But it wasn't in the shape of a pentagon. It was rectangular, and the 5th porch ran between the middle, creating 2 basins in the pool, a rectangle, but 5 porches. And you might ask, well, why would they build a pool with 2 basins? And what the archaeological evidence shows is that the southern basin had these broad, shallow steps with landings, indicating that it really was a mikvah, a purification bath of Jewish ritual use. And the northern basin on the one side of the porch provided a reservoir that would constantly replenish the southern basin with fresh water that flowed through the dam in the middle. And this was the pool that John wrote of, and the veracity of his account is now viewed in an entirely different light because they actually found the pool of Bethesda. And it's in this light of understanding that this really was a pool in Jerusalem at this time that we meet the paralytic in today's gospel story, who for 38 years has laid on one of the 5 porches of that pool, hoping that when the angel would come down and stir the water, he would be the first one into that pool and he would receive the healing. And I wonder how we in our daily struggle would react if we were faced with the same plight as this man. Would we persevere year after year after year, waiting for this angel to descend and stir the waters, and then just hoping that we would be the first ones into the water? Or would we give up after a couple of years, after 10 years, after 20 years? I know a man who became Orthodox, went through catechism and all the work involved, was baptized. And before he had even been Orthodox for a year, he left and returned to his former delusion. It's not giving up after even a few years. That's like saying, I'm tired of waiting for the angel to come down. But here in this story, we hear this paralytic for 38 long years. For 38 long years, he watched the others be healed. And yet he returned year after year after year. And he had no plan. In a way, he was almost in a state of hopelessness. St. John Chrysostom writes, "Hear now what he says, and learn the greatness of his sufferings. For when Christ had said, 'Wilt thou be made whole?' he answered, 'Yea, Lord, but I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool.' What can be more pitiable than these words? What more sad than these circumstances? Seest thou a heart crushed through long sickness?" But yet could we say that he's in utter hopelessness? Well, we can't, because he's there. And he isn't raging against God either. He didn't utter blasphemous words when Christ asked him, "Will you be made whole?" He didn't curse the day. He wasn't angry even at the question that Christ asked him. And can you imagine you're a paralytic laying on the side of the pool, knowing you don't have anyone to carry you in, and an able-bodied person comes by and looks at you and says, "Well, tell me, are you going to be made whole?" It might seem almost like you're being mocked with that question, but he didn't respond in anger. He wasn't angry either at Christ for asking the questions, and he wasn't angry with God or humanity for leaving him there for 38 years with nobody to help him into the pool. When Christ asks him, "Will he be made whole?" he doesn't accuse him of mocking him. He just replies gently and with great mildness, "Yea, Lord." Now, maybe he thought Christ might be the man who would carry him to the pool, but he simply relates his story and he asks nothing else. But will he be healed? His answer is, "Yea, Lord." He has no plan. He has no means of conveying himself into the pool ahead of the other people. But for his steadfast endurance, his patience, and his faith, he's healed on that day. Now, certainly, the most striking message to me in our instant gratification culture is that of the patience and endurance of this man, particularly carried out with humility, without anger, and with no sense of injustice. The paralytic endures and he receives his reward. In this, let him be our example of patient, long-suffering love for God. The paralytic did not know his next steps. He had no idea that his healing was just around the corner. In fact, that he was talking to the very man that would heal him. He just struggled and maintained his faith year after year and ultimately received his reward. To be sure, there was no naivete in his faith. It was a faith formed of disappointment, of suffering, of endurance, and of patience. But that same shaky, wavering, but persistent faith is what was rewarded on that five-porched pool of Bethesda. So, brothers and sisters, may our faith, weak and tattered though it may be at times, endure to carry us to our reward on that awesome day of judgment. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Christ is risen.
Thanks for listening to Hill Country Homilies. For more information, visit St. Andrew Orthodox Church at www.st-andrew.church. And please join us again next week.